Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Opposite the Monitor. And today we're going to get into some titles. And the first thing we're going to talk about is Alan Wake 2 and Remedy's final decision on making a game digital only. And this actually was something I wanted to kind of point out too. We'll get into it here where the developers kind of explain exactly like their reasoning behind it and why they chose this decision. So the developers explain that this way they can devote more time to the quality of the game rather than rushing for the sake of disc production. And I love that statement because it shows that they actually care about the product they're trying to deliver to consumers or to customers in general. And they also care about whether or not the game is expensive or not. And it being $50 on PC, $60 on consoles, I think that's actually a great kind of mindset to go into when trying to, develop a game and stuff like that. And I mean, a game, as historical as Alan Wake in general, man, it's an exciting time. They go on to say that going digital gives us as developers more time to polish the game, because otherwise a game that comes on disc has to be played without a patch. We didn't want to release something we weren't proud of, and we didn't want players to be upset. That's why we hope we can give you the best version of the game this way. And that's actually correct too as well. Typically when you do have games on disc, you do have to deliver a day one patch or some sort of patch for the game. And it's kind of like a current practice now of selling non-working games on disc, which require an additional download. I personally think this is a good strategy to go about. I do know there are some concerns with this because you have issues of, being digital only and not necessarily owning the game that you purchased and things like that. That's also a valid concern as well. I personally think, I think there's pros and cons to both, We do get a lot of rushed and unfinished products due to disc production. We also, get that same justification of why games cost so much. But we never hear about the other side of, what can we do to deliver high quality games without necessarily breaking the bank of our fan base, of our consumer base. And this is kind of like very interesting because you get a peek behind the curtain on the other side of the mentality of just like, hey, we can be able to, deliver a very solid project, very graphically, a high fidelity game. During the gameplay showcase for Alan Wake 2, that game looks really good. It looks polished. They're doing Alan Wake justice. And it's, it looks like a fully AAA quality game. And so, it's great to kind of get like a peek behind the curtain on the other side. And I also like the effort that they're putting in to be able to, deliver a game that, as people are anticipating. Like, I put Alan Wake in the same vein as Silent Hill and Resident Evil as well. Like they are very the fan base and the community behind these games are not only interconnected but also very passionate about these properties. So I mean, I'm excited for it. I'm glad I see this as a plus. For digital consumption. More games are being bought digitally anyways. But I do understand the physical edition side of it. We're going to get more into that because what also is a great segue for this, given that THQ Nordic kind of like reached out a helping hand to Remedy to allow a physical release for the game. THQ Nordic just came out and said that, they're going to, they're going to basically, restrict the physical run for their PC games only. So console games will still, get the box version with the disc in it and everything, but PC is going to have a strictly limited run. I kind of find this a little ironic because they're kind of like, I feel like discussions may have happened behind the scenes that we don't necessarily know about. And maybe they kind of like, were like, hey, you know what? Maybe this is the future, and I think we're starting to see the future of digital games, being released. and kind of sunsetting the physical run. Although I still personally do enjoy physical games or physical copies of games. But I typically enjoy them more when they're within the collector's edition, because you get the steel bookcase, you get a lot of different collectible items and things like that, and it kind of creates a set piece for the game that you purchased. But to go into more detail on this issue, THQ Nordic plans to have a limited physical run for the PC versions of its games. As I said before, any PC game with the box version will have a small amount of units made for standard and collector's editions. And they kind of go into how it's basically going to be broken down between each retailer. So you'll basically get like you'll get a subset of physical copies that will be released at THQ Nordic's Vienna store. Then it'll be online stores and specific retail partners. So I'm assuming, Best Buy, Walmart, probably GameStop as well. And then the rest of the physical versions, the very last bit of it, I guess, that they have left over will go into Embracer Games archive to be preserved. So, you could take that with a grain of salt of how they're preserving it. I guess they're just like being able to kind of like, I guess it's a way to be able to allow like a re-release, of their classic games. Like, for instance, if these games, end up selling well, and things like that, are well received. But they already have a few games that are affected by this: Gothic 1 Remake, Alone in the Dark, Recreation, and Outcast 2. Alone in the Dark is actually seems like a pretty good remake of the game. I played the demo on Steam. Definitely has a great atmosphere to it. I enjoy the little prequel that they have with I forget they scratch the name out. I forget the main character's name, but the little girl in Alone in the Dark. You play as her, and you're just exploring this hotel. And the setting, the atmosphere, graphically it looks nice. And I can definitely see that one being, in the Embracer Games archive and possibly being like a re-release later on down the line. But that brings us to the next thing of dealing with this, is that there's been concerns over physical games, which is, valid, because, when it comes down to actually owning the product that you purchase, you want to buy something and then you want to be able to have it forever. You want to be able to have it for as long as you want, and you want to be able to revisit that game, not necessarily have corporations and companies be able to control your access to what you purchase. And, at any point in time, like we've seen this before, where games are just being pulled from online stores and stuff, or just like, one thing I will say is that, GOG does a great job with this, with their DRM free, where you can you basically buy a game from their online store and then download it, and then you own that game. That's what I love about GOG. Shout out to CD Projekt Red. That's one thing I do love about GOG, is that this DRM free. Once you purchase a game online, you actually own that game, and it's downloaded. You keep it forever. But they go into more detail about this. Locking games to a digital format isn't just isolating to those with inconsistent internet. It raises further concerns about the game's preservation. And so, they kind of go on to talk about Alan Wake 2, which we just mentioned earlier. But there's been a trend of these of this kind of behavior with developers and publishing companies, where they're limiting the physical release versions, and they're going to kind of like invest more into the digital release. But it, for instance, this trend is affecting games like the upcoming Like a Dragon, so the Yakuza game Like a Dragon, The Man Who Erased His Name, as well as Bethesda Starfield. So I kind of saw this, and this was kind of funny and interesting too, because there's just been so much kind of like negative news going around Bethesda since the Starfield Direct showcase. And I kind of understand both sides a little bit, but for me, it's just like, if you're going to, the way that Bethesda's doing it is that the standard edition is coming with a disc and the collector's edition is not. The collector's edition is coming with a downloadable code. And me personally, I think that, it's kind of backwards. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that you probably should invest more. If you're going to do a physical release, in my opinion, I think that you should probably invest more into the collector's edition and make that more of like an event versus selling like the standard, and being able to get, the standard edition in a disc, but not the collector's edition in the disc. That just, it just feels like that needs to be flip flopped, in my opinion. But yeah, I do think it's kind of weird. We are starting to kind of see the sunsetting of physical releases a little bit and starting to get more into, digital release. But yeah, I mean, I can understand both sides. I think that, there's pros and cons to both. I think that having, a physical release is great for the older generation or the older fan base of people, or people who just grew up with, loving to go to the store, be able to buy that hard copy, be able to, I mean, there's people that collect the steel bookcases of their favorite games and genres. I know I typically do that with a lot of my favorite games. Like I have all of the steel bookcases for the Resident Evil remakes. I have the steel bookcase for Red Dead Redemption 2, as well as that treasure chest that it came with. Steel bookcase for Destiny, the original Destiny. So it's just like, they're nice collectibles to have, as well as with the disc and stuff like that. So that's why I kind of understand the physical release side, as well as being able to actually own what you purchase, versus being at the whim of corporations, being able to, strip the game, shut the game down. We've seen that with like Google Stadia, right? Where their entire library of games is in the cloud, and then once, the funny thing about Google Stadia is that you had to repurchase those games, and then, repurchase games you already purchased already. And then once, Google just shuts down their entire service, now you no longer have access to those games anymore. And that's one major concern that people are having with the digital side of things. But the pro is that I can see that, going digital only, can allow for developers to at least present the opportunity of, hey, you know what, there's more streamlined patching and updates versus, having to do like a big day one patch sometimes, especially with people who don't necessarily have good internet. Luckily, I'm blessed to have really good internet where I live at. I have fiber optics where I live at, so I don't necessarily have too many issues with updates, patching, and downloads of games and stuff like that. But for people who do, objectively speaking, and in a general sense, the majority of the population, they don't have amazing internet. So unless you live in like a big city, like a major city and stuff like that, this, being able to download a digital, or being able to download like a 40, 50, 100 gig update sometimes can be, can definitely be time consuming and, tedious and stuff like that. So I can definitely get both sides, as well as the digital side kind of presents more of just like, hey, we can kind of cut back on the price, because one thing I will say is that the justification for $70 is definitely not worth it for games that, release broken and buggy a lot of the times. Or if you're getting the same amount of content, I guess. I don't necessarily like to put like $1 an hour type of, mentality on the value of a product versus the price of it. But, I feel like today, there's a lot of games that are releasing for $70, $100, $120, and they come out not fully featured, and they come out buggy, broken, and an overall just a bad experience. And we'll get into more of that later on in the show. But Yeah, I just wanted to bring this up because I thought this was very interesting. You know how, THQ is definitely kind of like, hey, you should go ahead and like, we can help you release Alan Wake 2 physically, and then turn it around and they're like, okay, now we're doing like a limited physical run of our own titles. So I kind of thought that was pretty interesting and pretty funny. But so moving on, we do have some information about Bloober team, and seems like they're completely done making psychological horror games. This is a good thing. They're not completely done with horror. So to kind of like put this in perspective, Bloober team, who are the creators of Layers of Fear, and the Medium and stuff like that, they are making the new Silent Hill 2 game, the new Silent Hill 2 remake from Konami. They're spearheading that development on that game. But they've been, mostly known for very environmental horror games, essentially, that are not necessarily very mechanically based. So they go in to kind of like explain, and these are a few quotes from the studio founder, the co-studio founder. I will not try to pronounce his name because I know I will butcher it. But they go in to say that this year is like closing the era of making psychological horror games. Right now, we're going into Bloober Team 3.0, making mass market horror. So what they mean by that basically is that Bloober Team 2.0 was the whole like, environmental psychological horror where, things float in the room and fall off the wall, and, sound design and things like that, which I think is a great thing to have. You need those kind of elements in a horror game. And I also think that like they do a great job just from playing the new Layers of Fear, and some of the Layers of Fear 2 and 3 from the previous franchise, from the original one. And the Medium, they do a great job with the atmosphere, and the environmental cues that they do. And that is very essential, but they do lack in, being able to, kind of like more mechanically be able to, I guess, fight back, a little bit of action, something more akin to like Resident Evil, where, with Resident Evil 2 Remake, they still were able to capture that horror aspect while also being able to, roundhouse kick enemies and be able to like, shoot shotguns and grenade launchers and stuff like that. So they were, they're kind of trying to, Bloober team is trying to transition from, that only psychological horror, only environmental cue based horror. No, like, I think that also helps with not being able to do like jump scares and stuff like that. So, not being able to rely on jump scares is actually what I mean to say. But that's kind of the definition of them saying they're transitioning from Bloober Team 2.0 to Bloober Team 3.0. But they go on to say that because of these design choices, Bloober games have jokingly been called walking simulators. And I can attest to that with Layers of Fear. The new Layers of Fear remake, it is very much so just a very linear based storyline. You're walking down hallways, going in the rooms, it's very atmospheric and great storytelling, but I will say that there's a little bit more left to be desired from that title because of the lack of engagement that the player has when being able to create a more exciting aspects of a horror game. But they go on to say that we focus on the story, we focus on the mood, we focus on the quality of graphics and music, but we didn't put a lot of attention on the gameplay mechanics. It wasn't our target, but we decided that there was a ceiling that we couldn't break if we did not deliver something fresh, something new. And this is good news. I love the fact that they recognize, they got feedback from their consumer base, and they recognize that, maybe we can, add another layer to this, make things a little bit more engaging for our player base. And it creates a lot of hope that Silent Hill 2 will be, a good remake, a good successor to the predecessor, basically. I just think that, Silent Hill 2 does, Bloober has some big shoes to fill. while making Silent Hill 2. But it does put a lot of things in perspective. We definitely want a very horrific Silent Hill game. I think Bloober team can be able to achieve that atmosphere that Silent Hill kind of brings. I do think they, because they don't, in Layers of Fear, it's not necessarily reliant upon jump scares. There are jump scares in the game, but not necessarily it's more atmosphere based. I think that with Silent Hill 2, they could lean more into jump scares. They can lean more into, being able to, as far as the gameplay mechanics go, being able to flesh that out. Probably some chase sequences and scenes like that, something to kind of drive that adrenaline for the player. They already do a great job with making you be attached to the story and being more engaged as far as from a narrative driven standpoint. But, that kind of does bring a little bit of hope to or a little bit more insight to how the Silent Hill 2 development is going, and stuff like that. Now, I'm excited about that. We also got some more additional information on Silent Hill 2 that I also wanted to bring up and kind of point out as well, is that, I would definitely take this with a grain of salt, but Bloober team Silent Hill 2 remake will be 100% bigger than the original. So this comes from, one Duke Golem subscriber asks if Bloober team was planning to expand the original game, to which the insider replied, yes, the game will be 100% bigger than the original. So as you can see, this comes from a Discord post. I would take this with a grain of salt. Definitely if it's going to be 100% bigger than the original game. I mean, the original game was mostly just, hallways, inside a facility. Every now and then you would go outside, down the alleyway, down the street. But they go on to kind of, I guess describe their idea behind the 100% bigger than the original statement. But as an assumption, gamers will be offered not to just a technically updated game, but an augmented and expanded remake similar to the ones released by Capcom. So, being able to, I would definitely enjoy a Resident Evil style Silent Hill game. I think they do. I think Capcom does an amazing job with their Resident Evil remakes. If anybody's been, listening to the previous episodes, you guys know that I am a big Resident Evil fan, and Capcom is doing an amazing job with the remakes. We're finally getting to that point of Resident Evil 5 being remade. I really hope. I mean, look, it's a classic event that happens, but I really hope they just get rid of that entire scene of, Chris Redfield killing Wesker by punching Baldur and pushing him into the volcano. That was just, Resident Evil got a lot of criticisms. Resident Evil 5 in particular got a lot of criticisms because it was the first game that deviated from a more horror oriented aspect to a more full on action movie. And that's understandable. So I'm hoping that, they kind of rectify that issue in the new remake for Resident Evil 5. Cause I know that's par for the course. They're going to do a Resident Evil 5 remake, because it is, given all its flaws and the gripes that people had with the game, it still was a memorable game. And it was one of the first co-op type of games. Well, not one of the first. Outbreak, I think, was the first, but this one was more so the mainline game, and it was co-op. So, I'm excited to get back into that. But having a Silent Hill 2 Resident Evil-esque remake style game would definitely be a great addition to the series. Being able, because it's a sandbox essentially. And Silent Hill 2, if they're going down that line of developing Silent Hill 2 in the lane of Resident Evil remakes, I'm all for it. I think it's going to be great. They kind of go on to speculate and assume that if that's the case, gamers can expect new locations, quests, possibly a slightly altered storyline, or the developers will introduce new characters. I don't think that should be the way you should go with this. Don't slightly change the storyline or include new characters. Don't do any of that. This is the first like this is the first remake of Silent Hill 2. And you kind of want to stick, in my opinion, sticking with the original source material will help you in the long run. And that's kind of what like Resident Evil did. Resident Evil didn't necessarily change too many aspects of Resident Evil 2 remake, other than like maybe some set pieces and how things were set up, and the actual face models of Leon. I think that was the biggest change that Capcom did with Resident Evil, was change like Leon's face and Claire Redfield's face, as well as Chris Redfield's face as well. So, you know, I think sticking close to the source material as far as narratively driven and, you know, keeping some of the original characters is one thing you need to not budge on. Don't change that. If you want to change, you know, some of the world design, set pieces, things like that, have different scenarios maybe happen differently or whatever, but keeping that mainline story is what is going to attract people to the game and stick with you when you make Silent Hill 3, or if you go and make a completely different, like if you make more Silent Hills down the line, it's going to build faith and rapport with people. So yeah, I think this news, given, you know, like this is the most news we probably got from Silent Hill 2, from the Bloober team, but I'm excited for Silent Hill, man. I can't wait for Silent Hill. I'm ready to play it. I do love horror games. And yeah, man, I hope they do a great job with Silent Hill. But moving on, though, we have some more information regarding Baldur's Gate 3. And man, oh, I'm so excited for this. Like, look, I know I said that, you know, I know I said that Mortal Kombat is my personal game of the year. But objectively speaking, I've played almost 100 hours of Baldur's Gate 3 in early access. And man, do I love this game. I've never been so much into D&D. I do know of D&D just a little bit, but man, when I tell you, like, this is the best fantasy RPG that I think I've ever played. And I've played like Divinity Original Sin from Larian Studios. I played the original Baldur's Gate games back in the day. Man, like, this is the most content I think I've ever seen in a game, like in a long time. I remember Skyrim being about, with all of its DLC, being about 400 hours total. But Baldur's Gate 3 promises a level 12 cap, which is an increase from 10, which is also great. New races, 22 new subclasses, and a whopping 174 hours of cinematics. Man, that is crazy. So, you know, they kind of addressed the initially slated level 10 has been raised to 12. And you know, that's actually a really good point, because so they also go on to kind of describe why they did that and the purpose for increasing the level cap. And it says, while we originally planned for level 10 to be the highest character level in the game, too many rad high level spells would have been left just out of reach had we done so. Instead, Baldur's Gate 3 players will be able to reach level 12, unlocking planar allies, Otto's irresistible dance, and chain lightning. And you know, they also go on to kind of describe the different classes. The Dragonborn is actually going to have the most sub races out of any class in the game. So you're going to get, like, you know, silver Dragonborn that, you know, is cold damage. Red is fire. You're also going to get the sub races, which is black, blue, brass, bronze, copper, gold, green, red, silver, white. You're going to get all of those. They kind of go on to describe the monk class, which I'm excited for personally. My main class that I played in early access is a warlock class. I played a warlock. I have two characters. I have a warlock class. And I also have a sorcerer class. I tend to kind of like play around with magic a lot more. I don't necessarily like playing DPS. But you know, they go over the monk class, how that's kind of be like a balance between a fighter and rogue. Those particular kind of abilities that, or the styles that you're going to be using the monk class with will be like with the step out of the wind. And they also have like I think 2 other classes that they kind of announced too, which is Way of the Open Hand, the Way of the Shadow, and the Way of the 4 Elements. So I'm excited for the monk classes. I think the last time I played like a monk class in a video game was Diablo 3, I think. And the monk class in that game was pretty dope. But yeah, a lot of information going on here. So they also go on to kind of describe more about the cinematics. Baldur's Gate 3 has more cinematic dialogue than 3 times all 3 of the Lord of the Rings novels combined. It has 174 hours of cinematics, making it more than twice the length of every season of Game of Thrones combined. That is a lot of content. One thing I will say is that Larian Studios, like, I've watched a lot of the dev vlogs. I've watched a lot of the podcast, not the podcast, the showcase that they have. The I think it's called the From Hell podcast or something like that, or showcase. And man, just some of the amount of voice lines that have been recorded in this game is crazy. So it's like, luckily I was an early adopter. I got into the game as soon as early access was announced, because I was excited for this game like before it released. But man, like, Larian Studios is trying to make this the ultimate RPG. And this is like the ultimate turn-based RPG. Like, I don't see any other art, like any RPG that comes out after this has big shoes to fill. And I know it sounds like I'm kind of like bragging and being like a fanboy with this, but even in its current state now, it's not even released with any of this with any of the information that's in this article yet. All this comes at release. Even the stuff that's in the game now can offer 300-400 hours, even more. I think I've seen like close to like upwards of like 500 to 600 hours of gameplay from some people. Even in its current state now, it's massive. And so I'm just excited for this game, man. They go on to say that whether we'll be seeing 3 novels worth of dialogue on a single playthrough, or whether Larian's rolling its branching storylines into one massive number, we'll have to be seen on the game's full release. I think it'll be the first choice. I don't think they're gonna, from what I played and from what I've currently played already, the way that the game plays is that there's more for you to kind of get when you play different characters. It has a replayability factor within it, because your dialogue choices, your race, your religion, everything kind of plays a role within the character that you created, the character that you want to be as. So depending on what kind of race you choose, depending on what kind of religion you choose, depending on how you interact, how you present yourself within these different dialogue trees, and not dialogue trees, but when these different dialogue instances, when you go into towns, when you interact with other NPCs, things like that, it can lead you down a certain road, even with just the decision making. So there's so many different possibilities within each character, within each race, subclass, things like that. Especially if you choose not to go down the necromancer path. If you choose not to go down the necromancer path, there are storylines and things that you will not get to experience because you can't talk to the dead. And so, man, this game is just like the ultimate, RPG party game. Is like, typically what I end up doing is, and what I've done in the past with playing in early access, is that like I typically, make my character, I'm set on my character, and then, I kind of reach out to my friends and be like, okay, like, we're going to have, different character roles and things like that, so we can kind of experience, we can have different experiences and stuff while we play together and get our party together. And man, it's just such a fun time, especially with friends. It's such a fun time. You have friends that know how to cooperate, know how to work together, know how to communicate, know how to actually kind of play a role and not necessarily play, it'll be it's difficult to try to introduce someone to a game of this caliber if they don't understand that being a playing a role is the key factors. I've played with people who want to kind of do everything, and it kind of takes away from, each player's experience when you play with someone that, just kind of like wants to take everything, wants to be able to interact and talk to everybody. It's not a game that's meant for that. It's a game that you kind of engulf yourself in your role playing when you create your character. And that's how you have the maximum fun, maximum potential with it, is that when everyone can kind of play their key roles and we can all kind of congregate at the end and, discuss the information that we've been able to investigate and get and be able to progress through the storyline together in, different ways and be able to kind of like support, help each other and things like that on our adventures. So, man, I'm excited for Baldur's Gate 3. I think this game is going to be amazing. I think this game is definitely worth the buy day one. I mean, if they like, I definitely want to get a bunch of collector's items for this game. I already purchased the game, but I'm pretty sure they're going to sell collector's items, statues, things like that, man. This game is amazing. And yeah, thank you, Larian Studios. Thank you for this remarkable game that you're making. But moving on, we have some bad news. I kind of want to sprinkle in some good news with some bad news, but within our events, and man, it seems like another free-to-play extraction shooter is shutting down. And it still has a pretty good solid player base. Like 2,000. I think the last concurrent Steam player base was about around 2,000 or 2,400 players. But if you don't know, but Cycle the Frontier was a extraction shooter. It was more of like an EFT light. And I wanted to bring this up because it seems like we're getting a lot of these games moving forward. And some of them are in the free to play nature. And this one was also free to play. And not only did we get this, but we're also getting Marathon from Bungie. We're also getting Arc Raiders from Embark Studios, which, if you guys don't know, that's that studio's head by one of the Battlefield developers. I think it's more than just one. I think it's like a few Battlefield developers that actually and creatives that are directors and that used to work for DICE. And so we're getting it seems like we're going down this trend again. First it was Battle Royale, now it's free to play extraction shooters. And so, they kind of came out and said that, man, they are, sunsetting this game, September 27, 2023. And it's crazy because this game's only been out for, I think a little over, I think coming up to a year now. It's a little over a year, June 8th of last year, which is crazy. And they kind of give the reasoning behind this. We'll get into it. So the developer Jaeger says that despite its best efforts and meaningful improvements brought to the game since launch and up until the release of Season 3, it can't ignore the reality that the Cycle Frontier is unfortunately not financially viable anymore and will sunset on September 27th, 2023. And, they kind of get more details here. Sunset key info. So servers will shut down on the 27th at 9 or 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. All real money purchases disabled as of June 28, 2023. Refunds will be issued for any real money purchases made after 3 a.m. Daily and weekly offers in-game discounted at least 95%. Free premium Fortuna Pass and discounted level skips, overall progression accelerated, things like that. And yeah, man, it's kind of unfortunate, man. The fact that, this studio, because the Cycle is actually the original before the Cycle Frontier was actually a really good premise, really good game. And it was kind of successful in its own right at the time. And then they kind of like wanted to strike out, do, kind of like a sub genre of the Cycle, calling the Cycle Frontier, and it's an extraction shooter. So they kind of wanted to break away and like I said, trend chasing. And this is kind of like the result of trend chasing a little bit, as well as making a free to play game. But they go on to say that Jaeger says the game actually got off to a great start, players started flocking in mass to the game after certain big streamers began playing it in front of hundreds of thousands of people, forcing Jaeger to scramble to upgrade his server infrastructure to support the game. So I find it funny that, the game didn't necessarily hit it kind of hit a roadblock, an obstacle with not, having a server infrastructure at first, which is perfectly normal. It's par for the course. Like you can't just spend resources and money on a certain kind of infrastructure and then don't have the player base to actually utilize the money that you're using for that infrastructure. But they didn't falter at that point. What they go in to say is that the main reasoning behind this is that the game was heavily impacted by cheaters. And by the time the studio got additional partners on board for its anti-cheat efforts, many of you had already been affected. And as a result, we saw a significant decrease in our player base. And this is what I kind of I love to try to iterate on my channel is that, having free-to-play games, trend chasing, things like this definitely is, comes with, great success and quick success, quick money, things like that. But you kind of fuck yourself in the long run. And the main reason why I say this too is because we've seen this with previous games before. For example, Halo Infinite. And I got a lot of flack back in the day when Halo Infinite came out about, them making a decision to make this free to play. Because it can be a detrimental decision to have. It's a double-edged sword. Yes, you get if your game is good or if it's well known, you can get the success of having the most amount of players enter into your environment. The problem that brings is that you also bring cheaters, you also bring cheating software, you also bring all of the bad shit that comes with that. And this is why for me, I will always kind of support, developers making games purchasable to be able to access. And the reason being for that is because this free to play model is some shit that came from mobile games, and mobile games have some of the most predatory and egregious microtransactions and some of the worst kind of schemes as far as monetization. And free to play is just a conduit for all of that to happen, as well as cheaters. So when you do free to play, you open the floodgates to allow any and everybody to access your game. And sometimes having that much access can cause your game to, deteriorate over time. And I kind of seen this coming too as well with this, because comparatively, granted, these studios are, one's a major corporate, one's $1 billion entity, and the other one is not. It's the Cycle, the developers behind Cycle, Jaeger is an indie studio, and Activision Blizzard, and Activision Blizzard still is having issues with cheaters to this day. Now with Warzone 2.0, DMZ, they're still having issues with cheaters, and every time I turn around, they're coming up with new strategies, new ways to be able to combat cheaters. Even the most recent information that we've gotten today or yesterday at the time of this recording is they've come up with ways to kind of make cheaters, it's the hallucination, I guess, approach to it, where it kind of doubles the image of a person when their cheating software detects when their anti-cheat software detects cheat software. And so, if Activision Blizzard can't even resolve this issue via anti-cheat on their free-to-play games, I kind of assume that the Cycle frontier is going to have a terrible time. So it's not even just creating anti-cheat or increasing their anti-cheat efforts, I would say, for this game that would have resolved it. I think that it would have came to this conclusion even if they would have had the additional partners on board. You still would have cheaters rampant, because if a multi-billion-dollar corporation can't rectify that situation and can't resolve the issues that come with that, I don't expect Jaeger to be able to just all of a sudden, we have the technology built to be able to properly combat this. So it's unfortunate, man. some people had their, some reviewers had their, kind of take on it. We won't get into that, but it's kind of more of like a, subjective kind of sense to it. We have one reviewer, from PCG's, review, I guess, where they kind of say that it was hours of boredom and frustration. I don't necessarily think that the game was boring. I played it. I don't think that the game was necessarily boring. It was PvPvE. So if you didn't run into actual players, you ran into like enemies and stuff like that as well. Like, I guess they call them, I forgot what the actual name for it is, but you ran into other enemies and stuff like that. But, I wouldn't necessarily say the game was boring or, I didn't get, frustrated. I think, there were some bugs and fixes that they needed to do. I remember at the beginning of my playthrough that, the sound design wasn't optimized. There was some times where people could just sneak up on you and you couldn't even hear footsteps. They would just, be right directly behind you, kill you, and you didn't even know exactly, where they were coming from. So, I don't think it was necessarily boredom, but I just think that this was just par for the course. I think that eventually we would have gotten this outcome was inevitable, because of the constant trend chasing, the constant, capitalization on what's popular at the time and stuff, and not necessarily thinking or being prepared for, this kind of outcome. We have historical data for a reason. Like when things happen to other companies, you should be able to kind of suss out what went wrong with their development and their launch, their day one launch, their release, things like that. So, it's unfortunate, but, it's just par for the course at this point with a lot of these free to play games. But moving forward, we have some more information, and this is something I kind of want to point out. Cyberpunk 2077 became a cool thing not to like. And this is from the VP of PR and communications. I'm not going to try to pronounce his name because I definitely will butcher it. It's Polish. But they go on to say that, I actually believe Cyberpunk on launch was way better than it was received. And even the first reviews were positive. Then it became a cool thing not to like. We went from hero to zero really fast. That was the tough moment. We didn't know what was happening. We knew that the game was great. Yes, we can improve it. Yes, we need to take time to do it, and we need to rebuild some stuff. I completely disagree with this statement. I don't think CD Projekt, or I don't think Cyberpunk became a cool thing to dislike, because there were a lot of people giving a very objective review of this game. Cyberpunk wasn't a completely terrible game. Basically like the story elements, the characters, the voice actors, the entire narrative side of things is amazing. Like the game narratively is a great and awesome game. The world itself is great. You can't just sit back and just be like, oh, it was a cool thing to hate, or it was a cool thing to not like or dislike or whatever like that, when you're responsible for the first impression. You're responsible for the launch, and it's just like, you can't necessarily just kind of be like, what I feel like this is just pushing the blame off onto, consumers basically, and people who purchase the game. It's like, you can't fault them for saying like, I dislike this product because the product released buggy, broken, and it's hindering my enjoyment and my experience with it. You can't just be like, oh, it just over time became a cool thing to dislike. No, the problem is that the game was broken, and when more people get their hands on the game, more people are going to voice their opinions. That's just a logical stance on it. Like, you don't just, you know what I'm saying? You don't just release a product that's broken and then over time it's just like, we're okay with it. We're going to celebrate the fact that it's broken. No, that's not how life works. That's not how this works. So they go on. He goes on to say that took us a lot of time, but I don't believe we were ever broken. We were always like, let's do this, whatever that means. I don't know what it's referring to. I don't believe we were ever broken. I don't know if you're referring to the game or your spirits, your morale. I'm pretty sure the morale at CD Projekt Red was definitely somewhat deteriorating because of all the backlash. I mean, even before the game released, there was a lot of defense of the game and some of the design choices that came with it. Like, for instance, I remember there was a lot of scrutiny behind making it first person. And there was a lot of people that came out to kind of defend the option of, it being first person. I don't think that it should have been first person. I think it should have been third person, but I can understand that they kind of want to go for more immersion, but you can still create a level of immersion, with a third person game. I mean, I like to bring up Red Dead Redemption 2. Like, that game is very immersive, and it's immersive for other reasons. Like, the viewpoint doesn't make it immersive, not necessarily. It can increase the immersion, but it's not the sole component of where immersion derives from. You have to get that through world building. You have to get that through dynamic events. You have to get that through, NPC dialogue. You get that immersion from other elements of the game. And I don't think first person is just like the end all be all for immersion. And that's kind of like where they kind of got their defense from with going to first person. I can see why they would think that, but, personally, just from a person who's just played like a lot of games and stuff like that, a lot of different variety of games, I don't think that first person is necessarily like the end all be all for immersion. But I completely disagree with this thought process that, it just became a cool thing not to like. I mean, Sony pulled the game down from the store, because of the bugginess and the broken aspects of the game. It's, like your police didn't even work correctly. You know what I'm saying? Like your confrontation elements within the game were not working. You had just, there were things promised of like random dynamic events happening and factions fighting each other and things like that. That was far and few in between on the release of the game. You had like a consequence element to the game as far as like with the police that didn't work at launch either. You know what I'm saying? Like, there were a lot of things about this game that, triggered the dislike over time for this game. I don't think that it was just like people just came to the conclusion of, oh, is it, it's trendy to say that it's people dislike it, I'm going to dislike it. No, there's valid critiques and concerns with the release of this game that made people come to the conclusion that they came to. You know what I'm saying? So it's just, I find it just funny and kind of like crazy, the fact that, an executive comes out and just shifts blame a lot of the times. And it's just like, no, you made a shitty, you need to make a shitty project, but you fucked up at release. And, this is the repercussions of, fucking up, especially trying to like charge people, money for some shit that definitely should have been, in the oven for at least another 8 months to a year, at least. You know what I'm saying? So it's crazy. But moving on, we have some more information. Lords of the Rings Golem developers are pulling out and making new games after Lord of the Rings Golem, and I'm not surprised by this. I kind of was skeptical about this game to begin with. I'm like, why are we getting a game based on a side character? And he has like no real kind of importance, I guess, in Lord of the Rings. I mean, I'm not a big Lord of the Rings. I didn't read the books. I watched the movies, but it's just kind of like weird to kind of base a game around this particular character. And kind of make this the forefront of development. But they go on to kind of say, Ted Litchfield from, PC Gamer go on to say that Daedalic Entertainment is ending its internal development efforts to focus on its publishing business and reportedly laying off nearly a third of its staff, 25 of the 90 employees. And this is unfortunate, man, because this was a terrible for me, I think it was a terrible decision to even focus a game on this character in the first place. You know, and then on top of that, you made this decision and you put people's livelihoods at risk by doing this. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, from my understanding, I think that this development company was, you know, they did a lot of point click adventure games. And so, you know, this was kind of very different game for them to make. But still is just, I always thought the initial announcement for this game was very like left field, really, when it comes to, you know, the game development. I kind of feel like this should have just been like this almost kind of feels like this is what you would get as a DLC offering to a mainline Lord of the Rings game. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is kind of like what you would get from that. But, you know, unfortunately they laid off, you know, a third of their staff. I think Ted kind of had some personal gripes with this. This is going real savage here. I wanted to highlight this because I thought this was kind of funny, as well as it kind of encompasses my, like, a little bit of my feelings towards this. But he basically says that while that team ultimately created a bad AAA stealth platformer, it seems like such a waste of talent. Why try and fit the square peg of your charming 2D adventure game development house into the round hole of let's make a 2012 core action platformer about the Jar Jar Binks of Middle Earth? Now 25 people so far have lost their jobs and we're left with Golem. So I think that was pretty savage. Coming from Ted, but you know, it kind of like encompasses a little bit of how I feel about this. I'm not gonna say Golem is Jar Jar Binks of Middle Earth. I'm not gonna say that. You know, he kind of, you know, he was there to be able to witness and observe a lot of stuff, and kind of had a little key role in the mainline story. But me personally, I don't think he deserves an entire game about his storyline of just like sneaking and watching people. You know what I'm saying? So it is terrible, but yeah, I thought that was pretty funny a little bit. He kind of went ham on that kind of take. But yeah, man, unfortunately, they are, you know, they got such bad backlash from this game releasing and it just being, you know, a turd of a game. You know, that they're not even making games anymore. You know, they're just gonna focus on publishing, which, you know, unfortunately is, you know, terrible thing to hear. You know, I don't think you should just give up. I think you should probably just like kind of like, you know, slash this out and then, you know, really focus on something different and, you know, come back the next time and kind of build that rapport. But yeah, unfortunately, man, it is kind of like a sad day for the Lord of the Rings Golem. But moving on, we have some more information. And this is kind of like some good news. You know, I know I've been kind of like being critical of, you know, Bethesda and Starfield, but it's for good reason. You know, you want games to kind of be released good, you know, you know what I'm saying? So, but they are partnering with AMD, and AMD is helping Bethesda optimize the PC version of Starfield. So AMD technologies will be applied to Xbox Series. So yeah, this is actually a good idea, a great idea. You know, I don't think you need to kind of like, it kind of creates like a window into Bethesda and how they're utilizing resources. You know, I don't understand why they're still developing games on this creation engine still. I can't confirm whether or not it is still on the creation engine. I haven't gotten into too much information. From what I can tell, it looks like it's on the creation engine, graphically at least, and the fact that it's 30 FPS as well. So it's almost like, you know, for me, I know this game's been in development for a whole decade, you know, and for me, I think they should have spent 5 years creating a new engine for this game and build it specifically for the Xbox Series S in the way that Insomniac did Spider-Man. Insomniac built an entirely new engine. Well, not for Spider-Man, for Sunset Overdrive. They built an entirely new engine for Sunset Overdrive and then tweaked and increased some of the optimization and performance for Spider-Man. And so I think that's what they should have done, or they should have just scrapped. They need to scrap the creation engine and just create an entirely new engine. Like scrap the creation engine and create a new engine, basically. But this is good news, man. AMD definitely, the great thing about this is that for console players, this is more of a good thing for console players. They speak about PC because of the FSR2 image scaling technology that comes within that, and having a Radeon, AMD Radeon GPU, but the Xbox Series S and X is built on AMD technology, just like the PS5 is. So AMD coming in, helping out is definitely a good thing for console players. So, you may get like a bump of performance with this before release date. Still have a few more months before the game actually fully releases. So, this is a pretty good announcement and stuff like that for the Starfield, community. The game looks pretty good. I'm still going to wait maybe like a month after the game releases first for me to kind of like, I'm not too convinced that Bethesda is going to be able to deliver $70 experience, especially given the whole procedurally generation element of it. I don't think you need 1,000 planets. 100 planets is perfectly fine. And I'll keep reiterating that point. But yeah, I think this is pretty good news though for Starfield. But moving on, our last hurrah for today, and it is Final Fantasy 16 sold 3 million units worldwide in 6 days. This is actually really, really good news, man. I've been enjoying my time with Final Fantasy 16. I think it's an amazing game. I think it's pretty dope. Man, it's just been a wild ride lately, man. I'm finally getting into the crux of the story, and man, it's just I like the fact that it's very mature. I'm so attached to these characters. I'm so attached to like Clive Rossfield, Jill Warwick, a lot of the different characters that are within this game. Not going to give too much spoilers, but man, like it is a really good game. But according to a new report, Final Fantasy 16 has sold more than 3 million units in just a few days. So to kind of put this in perspective a little bit, Final Fantasy 7 Remake sold over 3.5 million copies in 3 days. This entry also launched as an exclusive, but was released on the PS4 in 2020, and the PS4 had more than twice as many players than the PS5. So this is actually, when you put it in perspective, given that there are less PS5s in the market versus PS4, like this is actually really good numbers in just a few days. And they're very, very, I would say similar numbers. It's both of them are PlayStation exclusives as well. So, I'm pretty sure Square Enix is happy. I know they were kind of like concerned about pre-orders previously and things like that, but man, this is great news. This is amazing news. Great, great game, great on Square Enix, man. Square Enix has had a rough year. They, with the Marvel games and stuff like that, it's been pretty rough. And they definitely needed a win. And Final Fantasy 16 is that win for them. So yeah, man, it's a great game. Definitely check it out if you haven't yet. I know it was review bombed for technical issues. I necessarily haven't had any issues since I've been playing it. I definitely recommend it. If you're still a little skeptical about it because of the reviews, just wait till it go on sale, man. Wait till it go on sale. Once it go on sale, get it, man. And I'm telling you, you won't be disappointed. But that's it for today, man. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. If you guys enjoyed the content, make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. And also, man, hit that bell. Hit that bell, man, so you can never miss a video, okay? Because you don't want to miss some of the stuff we're talking about over here, man. We get deep into it over here, and I kind of like, give a little bit of my opinion mixed in with some of the information that we get. So, man, hit that bell so you never miss a video. And thank you guys for tuning in today. Peace.